Lioness appears at safari camp. What she brings stuns the tourists. The sun hung low over the Serengeti, casting a golden glow across the vast expanse of savanna. At the Safari Dreams camp, a group of tourists gathered near the main lodge, their conversations lively as they exchanged stories of the day's adventures. Cameras were passed around, showcasing images of elephants bathing in a nearby river and a cheetah lounging under the shade of an acacia tree. The camp itself was a haven for nature enthusiasts, a place where the untamed beauty of the wild met the comforts of modern living. Tents with luxurious interiors dotted the landscape, blending seamlessly into their surroundings. A wooden deck offered a perfect view of the horizon, where herds of wildebeest and zebra grazed in the distance. As the staff prepared for the evening meal, the air was thick with anticipation. Tonight's sunset promised to be particularly spectacular, painting the sky in hues of orange, pink, and purple. But amidst the tranquil scene, an unexpected guest was about to disrupt the camp's routine and leave everyone speechless. It began with a faint rustle in the tall grass. At first, no one noticed, the sound blending into the natural symphony of chirping birds and distant animal calls. But as the noise grew closer, a few of the tourists paused, their conversations faltering. "Did you hear that?" a woman asked, her eyes scanning the edge of the camp. Before anyone could answer, a shadow emerged from the grass. A lioness stepped into view, her sleek, golden coat catching the fading light. Gasps rippled through the group as they instinctively moved closer to the safety of the lodge. "She's beautiful," someone whispered, their voice tinged with awe and fear. The lioness, however, paid no attention to the commotion. Her movements were deliberate but unthreatening, her gaze focused on something just beyond the lodge. It was then that the tourists noticed she wasn't alone. Nestled against her side, almost hidden by her body, was a tiny lion cub. The cub stumbled as it walked, its legs unsteady and its head bobbing with each step. It let out a soft mewl, its voice barely audible above the rustling grass. The sight was mesmerizing, a wild lioness, not hunting or prowling, but calmly bringing her cub into the heart of the camp. Even the staff, seasoned in handling wildlife encounters, were caught off guard. "What is she doing?" one of the guides murmured, his hand resting on the radio clipped to his belt. He didn't reach for it, though. Something about the lioness's demeanor kept him rooted in place. Ella, the camp's head ranger, stepped forward cautiously. Her years of experience had taught her to trust her instincts, and every fiber of her being told her this moment was extraordinary. "Stay calm," she said softly, her voice steady. "She's not here to harm us." The lioness stopped a few meters from the lodge, her body shielding the cub as she surveyed her surroundings. Her amber eyes locked onto Ella, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Ella met the lioness's gaze, her heart pounding. "What are you trying to tell us?" she wondered aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The lioness nudged the cub gently with her nose, urging it forward. The cub hesitated, its tiny body trembling, before taking a few wobbly steps toward Ella. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the lioness sat back on her haunches, her posture relaxed but watchful. She's leaving the cub with us," one of the guides said, disbelief coloring his words. Ella crouched low, her movements slow and deliberate. The cub approached cautiously, its wide eyes darting between Ella and its mother. "It's okay," Ella said softly. "You're safe here." The lioness let out a low rumble, not a growl, but a sound that seemed almost like a purr. It was a sound of trust, of reassurance. And then, as suddenly as she had appeared, the lioness turned and disappeared back into the tall grass, leaving her cub behind. The tourists erupted into a flurry of whispers, their shock and excitement palpable. "Did that really just happen?" someone asked, their camera dangling forgotten in their hands. Ella, still crouched near the cub, felt a wave of emotion wash over her. She reached out slowly, her hand hovering near the cub's trembling body. "You're safe now," she murmured. "We'll take care of you." The camp was abuzz with a mixture of excitement and uncertainty. The lioness's departure had left everyone stunned, and now all eyes were on the tiny cub that had been entrusted to them. Ella gently scooped the cub into her arms, feeling its frail, trembling body against her chest. Its fur was soft but dusty, and its breaths came in short, uneven gasps. The tourists gathered at a safe distance, whispering among themselves. "Why would she leave it here?" one man asked, his brow furrowed. "That's not normal behavior for a lioness." Ella didn't have an immediate answer. As a ranger, she encountered countless wildlife scenarios, but this one was different. The lioness hadn't been desperate or panicked, her actions had been deliberate, as though she had chosen the camp for a reason. She must have known it was the safest place, Ella said finally, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of questions in her mind. Maybe the cub was injured or abandoned, and she couldn't care for it anymore. Ella carried the cub into the lodge's infirmary, a small but well-equipped space designed for emergencies. Jenna, the camp's veterinarian, arrived moments later, her medical kit slung over her shoulder. "Does it hurt?" Jenna asked, her voice tinged with concern as she washed her hands. "Not visibly," Ella replied, placing the cub on a soft blanket. "But it's weak. I think it's malnourished." Jenna nodded, her movements efficient as she began examining the cub. The tiny lion whimpered softly, its eyes half closed as Jenna checked its vitals. "It's dehydrated," she said after a moment, "and definitely underweight. But there's no sign of injury. With proper care, it should recover." Relief washed over Ella, but was quickly followed by another wave of questions. "Why here?" she murmured, more to herself than to Jenna. "What made her trust us?" Meanwhile, outside the lodge, the tourists couldn't stop talking about what they had witnessed. For many, it was the highlight of their trip, a story they would recount for years to come. But for some, it sparked deeper reflection. "She must have been desperate to leave her cub with humans," one woman said, her voice thoughtful. "It's like she knew it wouldn't survive out there." Another man chimed in, his tone skeptical. "Or maybe there's something more going on. Animals don't just abandon their young unless there's a good reason." The guides exchanged uneasy glances. The Serengeti was a harsh environment, and the survival of the cub was far from guaranteed. Without its mother, it would depend entirely on the care it received at the camp. Inside the infirmary, Jenna finished feeding the cub a mixture of electrolytes and milk formula, carefully designed for orphaned wildlife. The cub's small body relaxed slightly, its breathing becoming steadier. "There," Jenna said softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "That should help. It just needs rest now." Ella sat down beside the cub, heart heavy with a mix of responsibility and wonder. She watched as it curled into a tiny ball, its eyes closing as exhaustion overtook it. "We need to figure out what happened to its mother," she said. "There's no guarantee she's safe." Jenna nodded, understanding the unspoken urgency in Ella's words. A lone lioness leaving her cub was rare, and the implications could be troubling. If the mother was injured, sick, or unable to hunt, it could indicate a larger issue in the area. "We'll take care of the cub," Jenna said firmly. "But you're right. We need answers." That night, as the camp settled into its usual rhythm, Ella and a team of guides ventured out in search of the lioness. The moon cast a pale glow over the savannah, and the air was filled with the sounds of nocturnal life. Armed with flashlights and tracking equipment, the team followed the path the lioness had taken earlier that day. Ella's heart raced as she scanned the terrain, her thoughts a whirlwind of possibilities. Was the lioness injured? Was she part of a pride, or had she been driven out? And why had she chosen their camp as the place to leave her cub? After an hour of searching, the team found fresh tracks leading to a small grove of trees. Ella signaled for the group to stop, her flashlight illuminating the ground. The tracks were deep, indicating the lioness had been moving slowly. "She was carrying something," Ella murmured, her brow furrowing. The team pressed on cautiously, their footsteps silent against the grass. Suddenly, one of the guides held up a hand, motioning for them to stop. Ahead, in the shadows of the trees, they spotted her. The lioness was lying on her side, her body heaving with shallow breaths. Ella's chest tightened as she approached slowly, her flashlight revealing a deep wound on the lioness's flank. Blood matted her fur, and her eyes flickered open weakly as the light fell on her. "She's hurt," Ella said, her voice heavy with emotion. "Badly." Jenna, who had accompanied the group, knelt beside the lioness to assess her injuries. "It's a bite," she said, her tone grim. "Probably from another lion. She must have been in a fight." Ella's heart sank. A lone lioness with a cub was already vulnerable, but an injured one was almost certainly doomed. "We need to help her," she said, her voice firm. Jenna looked up, her expression conflicted. "Moving her in this state could be dangerous, for her and for us. But if we leave her here, she won't survive." Ella glanced back toward the camp, where the cub was sleeping soundly under Jenna's care. "She trusted us enough to leave her cub," Ella said, her voice thick with emotion. "We can't let her down." Ella's decision was clear. "We're bringing her back to the camp," she said firmly, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "We owe her that much." Jenna hesitated but nodded, recognizing the urgency in Ella's tone. "We'll need to move carefully," she said. "Her injuries are severe, and any added stress could make things worse." The team worked quickly but gently, fashioning a makeshift stretcher from a tarp and sturdy branches. As they lifted the lioness onto it, she let out a low, guttural growl, her eyes flickering with pain and fear. Ella crouched beside her, speaking in soothing tones. "It's okay," she murmured. "We're going to help you. You're safe now." The trek back to camp was tense. Every movement had to be slow and deliberate to avoid worsening the lioness's injuries. The savannah, so alive with nocturnal sounds, felt eerily quiet, as if the world was holding its breath. When they reached the camp, the staff and remaining tourists watched in stunned silence as the team carried the lioness into the infirmary. Jenna immediately began tending to her wounds, cleaning and dressing them with practiced care. The lioness flinched but didn't fight, her strength too depleted to resist. Ella stayed by her side, her hand resting lightly on the lioness's back. "She's fighting," she said quietly, "just like her cub." The cub, sensing something, let out a soft mew from its bed near the infirmary's corner. Its tiny voice cut through the tension in the room, and for a moment, everyone paused. The lioness's ears twitched at the sound, and her eyes opened slightly, locking onto her cub. "She knows," Jenna said, her voice tinged with awe. "She knows her cub is here." The next 48 hours were critical. Jenna and the staff worked in shifts to monitor the lioness, ensuring she stayed hydrated and her wounds remained clean. The cub, now nicknamed Simba by the tourists, provided its own kind of medicine. Its presence seemed to give the lioness strength, and as the days passed, she began to recover. Ella spent every spare moment with the lioness and her cub. She marveled at the bond between them, how even in their weakened states, they drew comfort from each other. "You were willing to sacrifice everything for your cub," Ella said softly one evening, sitting beside the lioness's bed. "And now we're going to make sure you both survive." As word of the lioness's rescue spread, donations poured into the camp from conservation organizations and wildlife enthusiasts around the world. The story of her bravery and trust captivated hearts, sparking renewed interest in protecting the Serengeti's fragile ecosystem. The camp's guides took turns patrolling the area where the lioness had been found, ensuring no further threats loomed. They discovered signs of a nearby pride, which had likely driven her out. It was a harsh reminder of the realities of survival in the wild. "She might not be able to return to them," Jenna said one afternoon, her voice heavy. "But we can give her a chance to heal, and maybe even a fresh start." Weeks later, the lioness was strong enough to stand and walk short distances. Simba, now more active and playful, followed her every move. The tourists who remained at the camp marveled at the transformation, capturing photos and videos of the pair as they bonded. Ella knew the day would come when the lioness and her cub would need to return to the wild. It was bittersweet. She had grown deeply attached to them, but her mission had always been to protect wildlife, not domesticate it. One golden evening, under a sky streaked with the colors of sunset, the time finally came. The lioness, her wounds fully healed, stood at the edge of the camp with Simba by her side. The staff and tourists gathered to say their goodbyes, their emotions palpable. "You were brave enough to trust us," Ella said, her voice breaking as she addressed the lioness. "Now it's time for you to be free again." The lioness turned, her amber eyes meeting Ella's for one long, profound moment. Then, with Simba trotting close behind, she stepped into the tall grass, her sleek form blending seamlessly with the landscape. The crowd watched in silence as the two disappeared into the horizon, their silhouettes fading into the Serengeti's vastness. "The lioness trusted us," she told one group of students, her voice full of conviction. "Now it's our turn to show we're worthy of that trust." The children listened intently, their wide eyes filled with curiosity and wonder. Some asked if they could visit the camp, eager to see the place where such a remarkable story had unfolded. "You're always welcome," Jenna replied with a smile. "This is your story, too." Sam, who had once been skeptical of the camp's more emotional moments, found himself deeply involved in the conservation efforts. He took on the role of leading guided treks, sharing his own perspective on the lioness's story. His dry humor and straightforward approach resonated with guests, offering a unique lens on the profound bond between humans and wildlife. "People think the wild is something separate from us," Sam said during one trek. "But it's not. It's part of who we are." That lioness showed us that in the most unforgettable way. His words lingered with visitors long after they returned home, many writing back to thank him for reshaping their understanding of the natural world. The camp's growing reputation attracted not just tourists but also researchers and conservationists from across the globe. They came to study the programs Ella and her team had developed, hoping to replicate their success in other parts of the world. Safari Dreams Camp became a model for sustainable tourism and conservation, a beacon of what could be achieved when humans prioritize coexistence over exploitation. Ella often marveled at how far they had come. What had started as a simple act of compassion, rescuing a fragile cub and its injured mother, had grown into something far greater. It was a movement, one that transcended borders and cultures, united by the shared belief in the importance of protecting the wild. On the camp's 5th anniversary, a celebration was held to honor its achievements and the story that had started it all. Guests from around the world gathered under the Serengeti's vast, star-filled sky, their voices filled with gratitude and hope. During the ceremony, Ella stood before the crowd, her heart full as she spoke. The lioness came to us not because we were special, but because she believed in the good we could do, she said. She reminded us that trust is a gift, and with it comes the responsibility to care for what we've been entrusted with. Her words were met with resounding applause, the crowd's energy palpable. As the celebration continued, Ella stepped away from the group, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. The moonlit savanna stretched out before her, quiet and infinite. She thought of the lioness and Simba somewhere out there, living the life they were meant to live. And though she might never see them again, she felt their presence in every breath of the wild, every sound of the Serengeti's nocturnal symphony. "I'll keep my promise," she whispered into the night, "to you and to all who come after." The wind carried her words across the grasslands, a quiet affirmation that her vow had been heard. The lioness's legacy would endure, not just in the camp or the people it inspired, but the countless lives that would be touched by the story of trust, courage, and the enduring bond between humans and the wild. It was a quiet evening at the camp, the kind where the Serengeti seemed to exhale after a long day. The guests were seated around the lodge's open fire, their conversations low and relaxed as the sky turned a deep indigo. Ella was at the edge of the camp, watching the horizon as she often did, her mind drifting to the lioness and Simba. Suddenly, a sharp guttural roar broke through the stillness, sending a chill down Ella's spine. The guests froze, their faces turning toward the direction of the sound. It wasn't uncommon to hear the calls of lions in the distance, but this was closer, much closer. Ella grabbed her binoculars and scanned the savanna. In the fading light, she spotted movement. A group of lions, their golden coats blending with the tall grass, stalking toward the camp. At the head of the group was a large male, his mane dark and unkempt, his posture commanding. "What's going on?" Jenna asked, rushing to Ella's side. "It's a pride," Ella said, her voice steady but tense. "They're too close." Sam joined them, his expression grim. "What do you think they want?" he asked. "Food? Territory?" Ella shook her head. "Maybe both. But we need to act fast." She instructed the guests to move into the lodge, where they would be safe. The staff quickly began securing the camp, removing any food or supplies that might attract the lions. The tension was palpable as the pride drew nearer, their movements deliberate and unhurried. The large male stopped at the edge of the camp, his amber eyes scanning the area. Behind him, the lionesses and younger lions fanned out, their presence a silent but clear warning. Ella's heart raced as she tried to decipher their intentions. "Ella," Jenna said, her voice trembling. "What if they're here because of her?" It took Ella a moment to understand. "You mean the lioness? And Simba?" Jenna nodded. "What if this is their pride?" The possibility struck Ella like a lightning bolt. Could it be? Could the lioness, after all this time, have led her pride back to the camp? The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. But before she could process it further, another sound broke through the night, a high-pitched yelp, followed by a familiar low rumble. Ella's breath caught as she turned toward the source of the noise. Emerging from the darkness was a figure she recognized instantly. It was the lioness, her sleek body moving with urgency, and close behind her was Simba, now a formidable young lion. The lioness's gaze locked onto Ella's, and for a brief moment, the chaos of the situation melted away. "She came back," Ella whispered, her voice barely audible. But the reunion was far from simple. The large male lion turned sharply toward the lioness, his posture aggressive. He let out a deafening roar, and the lioness responded in kind, placing herself protectively in front of Simba. "They're challenging her," Sam said, his voice tense. "She must have been driven out before, and now she's trying to reclaim her place." The air was electric with tension as the pride circled the lioness and Simba. Ella's instinct was to intervene, but she knew better than to interfere in a confrontation as primal as this. All she could do was watch, her heart pounding, as the lioness stood her ground. The male lion lunged forward, his massive body colliding with the lioness. The two animals snarled and clawed, their roars echoing through the night. Simba, though younger and smaller, stepped in to defend his mother, his bravery undeniable. Ella clenched her fists, every fiber of her being willing them to survive. The guests and staff watched from the lodge, their faces pale with fear and awe. It was a battle not just for dominance but for survival, a testament to the unforgiving nature of the wild. The fight seemed to last an eternity, but finally, the male lion relented. Bloody but unbroken, the lioness let out a triumphant roar, her body towering over him as he slinked away. The rest of the pride hesitated, their loyalty shifting as they watched the lioness reclaim her place. "She did it," Jenna said, her voice trembling with relief. "She won." The lioness, her breaths heavy and labored, turned toward the camp. Ella stepped forward cautiously, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and sorrow. Simba, his own body marked with scratches, stood tall beside his mother, his eyes fierce and unwavering. Ella knew this was a moment of closure. The lioness had found her strength, her place, and her pride. She no longer needed the camp, but Ella couldn't shake the feeling that she had come back to say goodbye. "Thank you," Ella said softly, her voice carrying across the quiet night. "For everything." The lioness rumbled low in response, her amber eyes meeting Ella's one last time. Then, with Simba by her side, she led her pride back into the savannah, their silhouettes fading into the vast, moonlit landscape. The savannah was silent in the aftermath of the lioness's departure, save for the soft rustling of the grass as the wind carried it toward the horizon. Ella stood motionless, her heart still racing as she watched the pride disappear into the vast wilderness. Around her, the staff and guests emerged slowly from the lodge, their faces filled with awe and reverence. "That was incredible," Jenna whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "She came back to show us her strength, to show us she made it." Ella nodded, unable to find the words. The lioness's return had been more than a reunion. It was a message, a reminder of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable bond between the wild and those who cared for it. She had faced the challenges of survival head-on and had triumphed, not just for herself but for her cub and her pride. The next morning, the camp was alive with conversation about the night's events. Guests shared their experiences over breakfast, their voices filled with wonder as they recounted the lioness's bravery. For many, it was a transformative moment, a rare glimpse into the raw beauty and power of nature. "It's not something I'll ever forget," one guest said, her voice thick with emotion. "She trusted us once, and now she's shown us that trust was worth it." Ella listened quietly, her mind replaying every moment of the encounter. She felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the lioness and Simba, but for the opportunity to witness their story and be a part of their journey. In the days that followed, Ella and the staff focused on sharing the lioness's story with the world. They wrote detailed accounts, published photos, and reached out to conservation organizations to highlight the importance of protecting wildlife. The story of the lioness's return, her fight for survival, and her trust in humans became a symbol of hope for conservation efforts everywhere. Jenna, who had been deeply moved by the lioness's resilience, began working closely with local communities to educate them about the importance of coexisting with wildlife. She organized workshops, storytelling sessions, and even safaris for children, ensuring that the next generation would carry forward the lessons learned from the lioness. Sam, too, found a renewed sense of purpose. Though he had always been practical and reserved, the lioness's story had touched him in ways he hadn't expected. He took on a leadership role in the camp's wildlife rescue program, ensuring that no animal in need would be turned away. For Ella, the lioness's return marked a turning point in her own life. She had always been passionate about conservation, but this experience deepened her commitment to the land and its creatures. The camp became more than a sanctuary. It became a beacon for those who believe in the power of connection and compassion. One evening, as Ella stood on the lodge's deck watching the sunset, she thought of the lioness and Simba. Somewhere out there, they were thriving, their bond unbroken by the hardships they had faced. Ella smiled, her heart swelling with pride and peace. "They're out there because of you," Jenna said, joining her on the deck. "Because you didn't give up on them." Ella shook her head. "No," she said softly. "They're out there because of her. She had the strength all along. We were just lucky enough to witness it. Years later, the lioness's story continued to inspire people around the world. Visitors to the camp often stopped at a small memorial near the edge of the savannah, where a plaque read, "In honor of the lioness who taught us the meaning of trust, courage, and resilience. May her spirit guide us to protect the wild and the bonds that unite us all." Ella, now a respected leader in conservation, often visited the spot to reflect on everything the lioness had taught her. She knew that the story wasn't just about survival. It was about connection, the unspoken bond between humans and animals, and the responsibility they shared to protect each other. And though the lioness and Simba had long since faded into the endless expanse of the Serengeti, their legacy remained. It was in every sunrise, every rustle of the grass, and every moment of trust that passed between the camp and the wild. As Ella stood under the vast starlit sky, she whispered into the night, her words carried by the wind, "Thank you for trusting us. We'll never forget you." And somewhere, in the heart of the Serengeti, a lioness's roar echoed softly, as if in answer.